king of German mercenaries.
This is not surprising. You have to know that the Middle Ages was still dominated by the Church. All scientific knowledge was actually suppressed by the Church, and the speed of technology dissemination was very slow. Moreover, new scientific and technological knowledge also needed to prove itself. For example, the matchlock gun became famous and popularized in Europe after Gonzalo de Córdoba defeated the French army in the Battle of Cerinola with a phalanx of spears and muskets. Similarly, the flintlock gun was not taken seriously by European countries until it performed brilliantly in the 30 Years' War. In Europe today, matchlock guns are still a rare commodity. Even in a city like Bonn, there are few shops selling matchlock guns. However, there are several shops selling bows and arrows. Moreover, Europe's current steel technology was not up to standard, and the guns and cannons they produced often exploded. For example, King John II of Scotland died in 1460 because of a cannon explosion. It was not until the 16th century, when Europe's steel technology developed further, that the explosion of guns and cannons was greatly reduced. Because he didn't have the English longbow he was familiar with, Marin had to settle for the next best thing and bought a recurve bow with a pulling force of about 60 pounds and 30 arrows. In fact, whether it is the later Marin or the current little Marin, they can pull a strong bow with a pulling force of 100 pounds. Needless to say, the later Marin is a strong rural youth who has done a lot of farm work, so he is strong. Although Marin in this life is only 16 years old, he has received knight martial arts training since childhood and is very strong. He can pull a 100-pound bow. However, Marin knew that strong bows like the English longbow were fine for adults. If such strong bows were pulled too much in adolescence, it would easily cause the back of the spine to bend and deform. For example, later generations have verified that some medieval English longbowmen had spinal deformities because they were trained to pull strong bows since childhood. Marin's current body is still that of a 16-year-old boy who is still growing. He doesn't want his spine to become crooked due to using too many strong bows. Therefore, he chose an ordinary recurve bow with a pulling force of 60 pounds as his hunting weapon. However, the original Marin had no memory of how to use a bow and arrow, and the later Marin was only familiar with the English longbow. Therefore, it took Marin several days to become familiar with the use of the recurve bow. After testing, the effective range of this recurve bow is within 100 meters. However, the aiming distance is only about 50 meters. It may not be powerful enough to kill the enemy, but it is enough for hunting. After becoming familiar with the use of the recurve bow, Marin left Bonn and started hunting with the recurve bow while heading towards Vienna. But what made Marlin extremely depressed was that he hadn't caught any prey for a long time. Why? It's simple. Marin wanted to learn from the Mongolian cavalry and learn horse archery. Then, it was a tragedy. In modern times, Marin's archery skills are pretty good. Being able to shoot prey in the jungle means his archery skills are pretty good. But that's on the ground. Moreover, when Marin hunted in the past, he usually sneaked into the jungle with a bow and arrow, and attacked the unsuspecting prey by surprise. This is basically equivalent to shooting at a fixed target. For prey moving at high speed, Marin's hit rate is actually not high. And shooting arrows on horseback. Oh, it's all tears if I talk too much about it. Riding a horse is a completely different concept from riding a car in later times. Cars have shock absorbers and the roads are flat. Riding a horse, on the other hand, is bumpy up and down. So, Marin, who wanted to play horse archery, clearly aimed at the prey, but the horse jolted up and down, and the arrow immediately hit the target. Moreover, he was riding a horse, and the sound of the horse's hooves would inevitably alarm the prey, causing the small animals to flee in advance. Marlin was only good at shooting fixed targets, but he was helpless against small animals moving at high speeds. For 7 consecutive days, Marin failed to catch a single prey by riding and shooting. Fortunately, he had some savings from selling red deer before, otherwise, he would have starved to death. Similarly, it was precisely because of his savings that he dared to do this. Riding and shooting are indeed not easy. Marin looked worried. Think about it, the Huns and Mongols started to play with slingshots at the age of 5 while riding sheep. By the time they grew up, they had basically practiced archery for more than 10 years. Even so, even an old driver, who had practiced for more than 10 years could not say that he could shoot a running prey steadily while riding on a high-speed horse, let alone a novice like him. Therefore, although horseback archery is cool, it takes many years of hard practice and some talent to master it. For a half-baked person like Marin, horseback archery is basically a gamble on probability. The prey he shoots are all unlucky people who are destined to have a disaster. Chapter 7, taking in 2 servants. Part 1. In this way, Marin headed all the way to Vienna, practicing horse archery along the way, hoping to catch prey. But he still couldn't practice horse archery well until he arrived in the land of Württemberg. Württemberg would not be promoted to a duchy until 1495. In desperation, Marin had to give up the idea of shooting on horseback. In fact, he could also shoot on foot. However, after getting off the horse, he had to sneak up to the prey and then attack it. But the problem was that his horse was not quiet. It always snorted and kicked the ground with its hooves, making a loud noise. The prey would have been scared away when it heard the noise. If you don't bring a horse, you can leave it in the hotel. However, the prey is mostly in the deep forest. There is basically no prey in the area near the edge of the forest. Because the prey at the edge of the forest has basically been killed by local hunters. To get into the deep forest from the town near the forest, one must ride a horse. But even if he rode, Marlin was worried about tying the horse in a place where he could not see. If the horse was tied too close, it would make a noise and scare away the prey. But if the horse was tied too far, Marlin was worried that the horse would be stolen. After all, war horses were very valuable property in the Middle Ages. Even if Marin hunted 100 times and had a good harvest every time, he might not be able to get a war horse. You know, an ordinary war horse like Karl would cost dozens of marks. 1 mark equals 160 pfennigs, 1 pound equals 5 marks. Even the most ordinary pack horse cost about 10 marks. If Karl was stolen, Marin would not only lose his means of transportation, but also his qualification as a knight. Therefore, Marin would never neglect to take care of his warhorse for a few prey. These days, he met several knights on the road at night. However, the knights were always surrounded by people. Generally speaking, except for the down-and-out wandering knights, he had also seen a few. Knights with property would be accompanied by 5 knight followers when they went out. Among them, 2 followers helped the knights transport armor and lances. The other 3 were to explore the way and even help with cooking. And usually, among these 5 followers, there would be 1 or more capable fighters. This capable fighter was usually responsible for night watch to protect the knight from sneak attacks in his sleep. After all, knights were belligerent and it was inevitable that they would have a few enemies. Oh, if only I had a servant to help me watch over the horse, I could go into the forest to hunt with peace of mind. Marlin couldn't help but sigh. However, thinking that he only had a few hundred pfennigs and no land, how could he have servants following him? You know, the knight's servants were generally selected from the serfs in his own manner for loyalty. After all, if the servants rebelled, their families would still stay in the knight's manor and they would not be able to escape. Marin now has less than 800 pfennigs left, so he can hire a servant temporarily. However, it is difficult to guarantee that the warhorse will be delivered to this person temporarily, and this person will not ride the warhorse away because of greed. After all, a warhorse is worth about 6,000 to 7,000 pfennigs, which is enough for an ordinary person to live a good life for a long time. You know, the salary of an ordinary person is only about 2 pfennigs a day. After much thought, Marin felt that digging traps to hunt was more reliable. After all, he was not good at riding and shooting, and he was reluctant to abandon his warhorse. Only digging traps was the most suitable. Then he went to the blacksmith shop to buy a shovel to dig the trap. Last time he used a wooden mattock to dig the pit, he almost died of exhaustion. This time, he planned to use professional equipment. But what surprised him was that there was no such thing as a shovel in Europe at that time. There were only iron hoes, hammers, pickaxes, etc. As for digging soil, a shovel is obviously the most labor-saving and easy to use. Therefore, Marin had to ask the blacksmith to customize a short-handled engineer shovel in the style of the engineer shovel used for digging trenches in later generations. Of course, it does not have folding and other functions, but only a wooden handle with an iron shovel head, which is specially used for digging pits. The next day, Marin paid 10 shillings and got the extremely practical engineer shovel as he wished. You know, in the trench warfare of later generations, if the troops were not equipped with engineer shovels, they would not be able to dig trenches, and would definitely be killed by the enemy's artillery and machine guns. In his previous life, Marlin went hunting in the back mountain with an engineer shovel purchased online. He dug traps in the woods and used them to trap prey. He was very skilled at using it. Sure enough, after getting the engineer shovel, Marlin was like a fish in water, and soon dug 7 or 8 traps in one breath by the river deep in the forest. Moreover, these traps were dug relatively deep, so there was no need to worry about the prey jumping out. After covering the dead branches and grass, Marin leisurely rode his horse back to the small town where he stayed. On the way, Marin encountered some running prey, drew his bow and arrow. Sure enough, he missed. After recovering the arrow, Marin did not get discouraged, but went back to the inn happily. The next morning, Marin rode to the traps he had dug yesterday with great anticipation to check his harvest. As expected, when he checked the fourth trap, he found a wild boar. Then Marin was in a dilemma. Wild boars are very ferocious animals. If he let them come up, they might gore him to death. Wild boars have fangs. So Marin had to make a decision. Kill the wild boar and drag it back. After making up his mind, Marin stood on the pit, drew his bow and shot an arrow into the pit. After wasting 5 arrows, Marin finally shot the wild boar to death with great difficulty. The wild boar's thick skin is indeed not exaggerated. At such a close distance, Marin shot 6 arrows to kill the wild boar. If he met it in the wild, Marin would not choose to hunt wild boars. Damn, if he can't kill it with one shot, maybe he will be the one to die. I'm afraid that only a musket specially designed for heavy armor can threaten wild boars. Marlin did not drag the wild boar away immediately, but put it in the pit first. Then he rode on his horse to check the remaining traps. In addition to harvesting the prey, he also wanted to destroy the traps. Why? Traps can not only trap prey, but also people. During the day, humans are active, and hunters may enter the depths of the forest. If a hunter is trapped, it would be a sin. Therefore, after checking whether there is prey in the trap, Marlin usually removes the cover on the trap, and then puts a wooden stick next to it to remind others that there is a trap. In the next few traps, Marlin harvested 2 more rabbits. But in the last trap, Marlin was stunned. Why? There seems to be someone lying in this trap. Moreover, he was a very tall and strong young man. However, judging from the way he lay in the trap, it seemed that his head hit the ground first. So, this guy seemed to be dizzy. Of course, this guy is definitely not in danger of death. After all, the bottom of the trap is not made of bricks and stones, but soft soil. The reason why this guy is dizzy must be that he was hit on the head. After testing his breathing, Marin was very lucky. This guy's breathing was very stable. Soon, the tall young man woke up slowly, looking confused. What's going on? The tall young man scratched his head, as if he couldn't figure it out. It seems that this guy is not smart enough. I'm sorry, sir. You fell into the trap I dug. It's all my fault. Take this money. I hope it helps you. Marin took out 10 pfennigs and handed them to the young man. In theory, 10 pfennigs is not a small amount. It is equivalent to 5 days' wages for ordinary people. Moreover, the young man did not seem to be injured. However, to Marin's surprise, when the tall and strong young man stood up and saw Marin's clothes, he began to panic. He bowed to Marin and said, "Dear knight, I accidentally destroyed your trap. Please forgive me." After saying that, he did not take the silver coin handed over by Marin. Marin was stunned for a moment, then reacted. This era is the era of the nobility, and the common people are like ants. Originally, it was Marin's trap that hurt the young man. However, after the young man saw the armor Marin was wearing and the warhorse beside him, he realized that the person in front of him was a knight. So, he panicked. You know, in the chaotic Germany, the nobility is the law. If the noble lord in front of him killed him in anger, no one would avenge him. Although this tall young man is taller and stronger than Marin, he dare not show any dissatisfaction. Because everyone knows that knights have been practicing martial arts since childhood. Even if ordinary people are strong, they may not be able to beat knights who have learned combat skills. Moreover, even if they win, it is not a good thing, but it will bring disaster to their families. Therefore, after seeing that Marin is a knight, the tall young man decisively admitted his defeat. Don't be nervous. I mean no harm. By the way, what's your name? And what are you doing deep in the forest so early in the morning? My name is Khan. I came to the forest this morning to catch some prey and make soup for my mother. Khan. Marin was a bit Spartan. He looked at the guy in front of him. He was very ugly. He did look like Lion King Khan. Then, Marin burst out laughing. Ha 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 ha, Khan, that's so apartment. Ah. Khan was a little puzzled. Is his name so funny? After laughing enough, Marin asked angrily, Khan, you said you came here to hunt, where are your weapons? It's this javelin. Khan looked embarrassed. Marin took a look and saw that it was just a sharpened stick. But could this thing be used for hunting? Marin was skeptical. Can this thing also be used for hunting? This is my first time hunting. My mother is too weak and there is no food at home. So, I want to get some prey and make soup for her. Khan scratched his head and said that he was a beginner in the hunting world. Mother. Khan's words evoked Marin's memories. In his memory, the images of his mother in the next life and his mother in this life kept flashing in his mind. After a long while, Marin sighed and said to Khan, "Khan, come with me, help me move something, and I'll pay you." "Okay." Khan was delighted when he heard this. He didn't dare to accept Marin's compensation, but that didn't mean he didn't dare to accept Marin's employment. Being employed meant getting paid. Then, coming to the boar pit, Marin pointed at the dead boar and said to Khan, "Khan, help me get the wild boar up." "Yes, sir." Khan, who was about 185 centimeters tall, jumped down readily and lifted the wild boar weighing about 200 catties out of the trap. By the way, he also pulled out Marin's 6 arrows. Afterwards, under Marin's command, Khan dragged the wild boar towards his home. Soon, Marin and Khan arrived at Khan's home, a small house by the woods. Chapter 8, Accepting 2 Servants, Part 2. Through the conversation on the way, Marin learned that the Khan family was originally serfs of a nearby landlord. However, since Khan began to grow up a few years ago, he has been very good at eating and can eat as much as 3 people. Although Khan is quite strong, if he were placed in a knight's territory, he might be recruited as a knight squire because he has the potential to become a fierce general. However, the owner of the manor where the Khan family lived was just an ordinary landowner and squire, who didn't need a good worker. In addition, the harvest of the manor had been poor in recent years, so last year, the Khan family was kicked out. Khan's father, Smelman, knew a little about carpentry, so he went to work in a carpenter's shop in the city. Khan, his mother, 2 brothers and a little sister, a total of 5 people, built a simple wooden house on the edge of the Black Forest. Usually, Khan went to the forest to pick up dead branches as firewood. Logging must be approved by the lord, and sold them to people in the city to earn a little money. Khan's mother took her brothers and sisters to the forest to pick wild fruits and mushrooms, dried them and ate them as food. Because Khan ate a lot, even though Smelman had a good income and his family tried hard to supplement the family income, everyone still lived a tight life. This year, Khan turned 18. Smelman had taken Khan to the city at the beginning of the year, intending to make him an apprentice. However, after seeing Khan's horrible appetite, all the craftsmen's shops rejected Khan without exception. Apprentices did not receive wages, but were provided with food. In desperation, Khan had to come back to accompany his mother and brothers and sisters. Unexpectedly, Khan's mother Jenny fell ill and was weak. After spending all their savings on his mother's medical treatment, the whole family began to starve. So Khan thought of learning from other hunters and secretly went hunting in the depths of the forest. The lords here did not strictly control the people's hunting, and many people hunted secretly. If they were caught, they would at most be beaten. Unfortunately, the first time he hunted, not only did he not catch the prey, but he became the prey and fell into a trap. Arriving in front of the wooden house, Khan put down the wild boar, pushed open the dilapidated fence in front of the house, and shouted, "Mom, I'm back. A distinguished guest is here." Soon, a haggard middle-aged woman came out with a boy of 15 or 16, a little boy about 12 years old and a little girl about 10 years old. "Khan, who is this gentleman?" The middle-aged woman took a look at Marin and knew that he might be a knight. "My dear madam, my name is Marin, and I'm a knight." Marin introduced himself and saluted. "You are too polite, sir knight. We are just commoners and cannot bear your courtesy," the middle-aged woman said in panic. In her memory, only commoners would salute or even kowtow to nobles. How could nobles salute commoners? Moreover, she was just a low-class woman without a surname and could not bear the honorific title of madam. In other words, Marin, the time traveler, doesn't pay much attention to social class differences. If it were another knight, he would never look at a commoner with a straight face. If he could talk to a commoner, he would think that he was giving him face. Hearing that Marin was a knight, the younger boys and girls hid behind the women in fear. On the contrary, the 15 or 16-year-old boy looked at Marin with curiosity and was not afraid. "Kohler, what are you looking at? Why don't you salute the knight?" Khan glared at his second brother Kohler. Kohler reacted and saluted Marin, but after the salute, he still looked at Marin with curious eyes. Of course, this was not the kind of presumptuous look, but a little boy's pique. "Khan, go and drag the wild boar in," Marin ordered casually. "Sir, what do you want? Let's cook at your house and eat together." "No, no, no, how dare we eat your food, master?" Jenny shook her head. "It's okay, it's settled." "But, madam, can you help me make some food?" Marin could see that Jenny's illness had recovered, but she was still very weak. About half of her was also hungry. "Okay, Khan, can you kill a pig? This wild boar hasn't been processed yet." Marin suddenly remembered that this wild boar seemed to have not been processed yet. Yes, sir. I worked as a helper in the slaughterhouse in the city for a few days at the beginning of the year, so I know how to kill pigs. Just watch me. Then, Khan took the newly bought sharp dagger handed to him by Marin and went to deal with the wild boar. Although his technique was a little rusty, Khan managed to clean the wild boar. However, the wild boar's skin was a little damaged because Marin had shot several arrows at it. Jenny quickly cut 10 pounds of wild boar meat according to Marin's request and went to the kitchen to cook. An hour later, Marin looked at the food on the table and frowned. "Ma'am, you only know how to grill and cook meat." "Huh? Yes. Isn't that what everyone does?" Jenny didn't quite understand what Marlin meant. Marin also reacted instantly, how could Europeans know how to cook? However, he couldn't bear to see the delicious wild boar meat wasted by the ancient Germans' mechanical roasting and boiling. Then Marin asked, "Ma'am, do you have a pot at home?" "Ah. Yes, there's a frying pan." Frying pan. Although it is not a professional pan for cooking, it is better than nothing. Then, under the surprised gazes of the Khan family, Marin took off his armor and walked into the kitchen. After entering the kitchen, Marin called Khan and asked him to light the fire. He himself began to prepare the dishes. But what made Marin desperate was that Khan's family didn't have the oil needed for cooking. No wonder, in those days, Europeans only had two expensive cooking oils, butter and olive oil, which were only used regularly by the nobility. "Well, use some animal fats too." "Yes, animal fat." Marin slapped his head, then picked up a dagger, cut some fat from the wild boar corpse, and threw it into the pot to make lard. After boiling out the lard, Marin took out the slices of meat that Jenny had helped cut, threw them into the pot and started stir-frying. In addition to lard, the only condiment in Khan's house was salt. In desperation, Marin could only choose to add some salt. Half an hour later, a burst of fragrance wafted out from the kitchen, causing Khan, Kohler, Clement and little Mina to drool. When the fried pork slices were served, everyone except Jenny stared at them with drooling eyes. "Stop looking, let's eat together." Marin started eating first. The others were hesitant at first, but after Khan started eating, several children started to scramble for food. Soon, the plate of fried pork slices was gone. "I'm sorry, sir, the children are too greedy." Jenny saw this and thought, how could they steal the knight's food? Aren't they afraid of being killed? But Marin didn't care. This dish of fried pork slices was not very tasty because of insufficient seasoning. Of course, that was compared to the later Chinese stir-fried dishes. In this era, it was the first time Marin had eaten stir-fried dishes. "It's okay, it's nothing. At worst, I can just fry another one." The second time she cooked, Jenny didn't dare to let Marin cook, but planned to cook by herself. Under Marin's guidance, Jenny managed to cook a plate of stir-fried pork slices that was not bad. Then, it was divided up by a few naughty kids. "Oh, it's so delicious. I wish I could eat meat every day." Khan exclaimed contentedly after eating. "Come on, brother, unless you can become a noble's follower, you will have the chance to live this kind of life." Kohler said venomously. A noble's follower, even if he had to eat leftovers, still had the chance to eat delicious food. As for the common people, they could only eat black stick brick bread. The noble's follower. Everyone couldn't help but turn their eyes to Marin. Isn't this a ready-made noble? "Sir, are you short of a squire to run errands?" Jenny asked nervously. She could see that Marin was a knight, but he didn't seem to have a knight's squire. Maybe it was because he was still young. "Servants? Not yet. I plan to recruit a few servants after I surrender to the emperor." Marin told his plan. It was not a secret anyway. "Your Majesty." Several country folks were stunned by Marin's plan. Usually, knights were high and mighty in their eyes. The emperor was said to be much higher than the knight. The Khan family unanimously agreed that Marin had a promising future. How could a knight who could work for the emperor have no future? Then, Khan immediately looked at Marin with unsatisfied eyes. "Sir, can you accept me as your servant? I am very strong." After saying that, Khan flexed his muscles to show how strong he is. "You are very strong, can you move the stone at the door?" There is a big stone at the door of Khan's house, weighing about 300 kilograms. Marin asked jokingly when he saw the stone at the door. "Just wait and see," Khan said, and then he ran over excitedly, picked up the stone, and lifted it above his head. Marin was shocked. He thought that being able to lift 300 kilograms was a very strong person. You know, Marin himself could only carry, not lift, 200 kilograms in his previous life, which was considered a strong man in the later life. What he didn't know was that this 300 gene stone was actually the sports equipment that Khan used to exercise. Khan's limit was not just 300 gene, which was extremely abnormal. Very good, you have some strength, just right for helping me carry my armor and lance. So, if you want, just follow me. I'll pay you 3 pfennigs a day. Then, what about eating? Sir, our Khan eats a little too much. Eat a lot. How much can it be? Marin was not surprised, because most warriors were gluttons. For example, Schweringue's meal size was measured in buckets, not bowls. At least 6 pounds of food a day, and if you eat as much as you want, it may be 8 to 10 pounds. Jenny was a little embarrassed. However, this was an important question, and she did not dare to deceive the knight. For an average adult, 2 pounds of food a day is enough, but their glutton Khan must eat at least 6 pounds a day. Well, I can eat a lot. But, Khan, do you dare to go to the battlefield with me? You may die in battle at any time. Marin doesn't care about the amount of food, but he cares about courage and bravery. No problem, sir. Will I be able to eat my fill if I follow you? As long as we are full, we can do anything and we are not afraid of death. Khan said honestly. Okay, I like brave men. Okay, I'll take you in. Thank you for your appreciation. Jenny was extremely surprised. She was not only happy that Khan had a good future, but also happy that this poor family got rid of a good-for-nothing burden. Sir. Look, can I do this? Kohler was very excited when he saw his elder brother becoming a knight's attendant. Kohler, do you have any special skills? Your brother is strong, what abilities do you have? Marin was recruiting subordinates, but he was unwilling to recruit those who had no abilities. I have a good memory and I can do the math. Counting accounts. Have you ever been to school? In the Middle Ages, counting accounts was not something that ordinary people could do. Generally, only noble families, merchant families, and wealthy families would teach their children to count accounts. No, I learned how to use Arabic numerals from a Jewish merchant in town. Learn by stealing. Marin was speechless. He learned to count by stealing. It seems that this Kohler has a high IQ. However, are he and his big brother Khan, who has a low IQ, really brothers? Who was picked up, then? Marin tested Kohler on several 3-digit addition, subtraction, multiplication and division problems, and found that Kohler answered well. However, when it came to mixed operations, Kohler was unable to answer. Probably, Kohler's math level is that of a 3rd-grade primary school student. Marin remembered that his mixed operations seemed to be at a 4th-grade level. The math level of a 3rd grader in primary school seems to be enough for accounting. Then, Kohler also gloriously became one of Marin's attendants. As for the younger claimant, even if he was a talent, Marin would not accept him for the time being because he was not running a nursery and could not take care of children. Afterwards, Khan was ordered to go to the city to find their father, Smelman. After all, a father should know that his son followed someone else to serve as a servant.